Alleluia. Om Mani Padme Om. Allah Satnam.
Welcome. You're watching Harmony University. We're speaking with Zahid Ahmed, Peace Educator, Deakin University. We spoke with Zahid last week, and we're going to explore this week a report which he wrote for the United States Institute of Peace, a special report on peace education in Pakistan, and this was published in 2017, so we'll explore it. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you.
Now, the first thing to ask about a report like this is why?
Why is a very interesting question in this case, because the idea emerged with my argument that there was so much money in Pakistan coming in the name of peace for peace building projects, but there was hardly any assessment of that, what they had achieved or they continue to achieve. So to also convince and also to provide the evidence for all this investment in this sector, that there's a lot of important work happening, and there's still room for improvement. There can be lessons learned from many of those initiatives for other initiatives in the country and outside of the country. So with this desire, I came up with this idea of doing an assessment of projects happening from one end of the country to another, and then it shows very carefully 9 case studies of initiatives, both successful and not so successful, because in my opinion you can also learn lessons from not so successful initiatives. And so that was the basic idea behind many of these initiatives that looked at a cross section of initiatives that were implemented in different kinds of education systems. So unlike Australia, the education system in Pakistan is not uniformed. So we have, in Pakistan, there are 3 different kinds of education systems. So there's public schools run by government, then there are private schools run by private individuals, and then there are madaris, which are Islamic seminaries run by different individuals and different sectarian groups or institutions. So all 3 education systems have students coming from different social classes. The curriculums are different altogether. So for instance, in private schools they teach Cambridge University books, and of course the idea is to produce English speaking successful generation that comes on the top of leadership at the leadership level in Pakistan. And then you have public schooling that produces largely bureaucratic graduates who become bureaucrats in the country. And then madaris, of course, madrasas produced largely youth that takes care of the Islamic teaching in the country, and other madrasas, and so they get jobs. They have jobs. That's not an issue.
That sounds like this report is not that thick. I would have expected what you covered, this would have to have 5 or 6 volumes this thick. That's very well done.
The idea of these sort of brief reports is to present concise version of the whole research, because especially the policymakers and the people who are influential, they cannot read those 5-6 volumes. They with their limited time want to draw lessons from very brief versions of research reports, and that's why I give more value to concise versions that are written for audience that is not academic. So the language is also used. The language which is used is non-academic, with the purpose that these sort of studies have an impact. And if they don't have an impact, there's no value in for an academic and a practitioner like me in continue producing these kind of studies.
That's right. Yes. So well, it's probably early days, but but the take up of this, have you been able to measure the take up or the interest?
It's too early, but I've received very, very positive feedback. So, for instance, I've received an invitation from UNESCO in Paris to be involved in their special meeting on preventing violent extremism through education.
Oh,
so
good.
based on they want to draw lessons from my research on peace education in Pakistan, and I think from there on, like the process will keep on happening. And my idea is also to translate this into Urdu, which is the national language of Pakistan. So this research has wider audience and perhaps greater impact at the grassroots level in Pakistan.
And would you look at sort of breaking this report into separate reports to address particular segments?
Indeed.
Yeah.
And and then the very first bullet point of this research, I talk about the biggest challenge to peace education in Pakistan is this 3-tier education system.
Yeah.
So that basically means that one size fit all sort of approaches cannot be applied in this case, because each education system has different dynamics and different kinds of students come into each education system. So you have to contextualize even peace education model. So there can, in my opinion, there cannot be just one peace education system with existing realities in the country. If there was a uniform sort of education system in Pakistan, just like Australia, it would have been a lot easier to implement peace education. But with existing realities, it's difficult. And that's why this research will be broken into at least 3 key components, providing advice on different education systems in the country.
Well, contextualizing, isn't it, for them? So you've got at least 3 contexts that you're operating in.
True, because it's very complex, Pakistan. It's not only ethnically diverse and religiously diverse, it's very, very diverse in terms of the kinds of education systems we have. So the job of a peace educator or a peace builder in a context like that is to become more creative and work on different options that can give you greater chance of success in different education systems.
Well, let's talk more about that. You say there were 9 different examples. We're a bit out of time, so we'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and we're speaking with Zahid Ahmed, a peace educator. And we're talking about your report there, Zahid, and you mentioned that there were 9 case studies, but the key issue is that they're the 3 education systems. Perhaps you could outline the distinction between those, the things that you learnt as to the improvements or the changes that might need to be made in relation to them. Start where you want, whichever one you want.
Yeah, there are a lot of key features because all 3 are very different to each other in terms of not only what they teach, but how they teach. So for instance, quality of teachers varies from one institution to other. The curriculum also varies among those institutions. So starting with, let's say, madrasas, because they received a lot of attention in the post 9/11 era with blames on producing these fundamentalists and extremists. And so initially the focus was on actually doing these peace education programs in madrasas in Pakistan. So a lot of projects were implemented on that, and I included 2 case studies. Just focusing on madrasas, one focusing on female madrasa, another one focusing on male madrasa, madrasa for boys. And also the key feature of the programs that I evaluated is that madrasas hardly go into the so-called highly sensitive issues like sectarian violence in the country and the differences based on Shias and Sunnis in Pakistan. And this could be seen as madrasa's conflict sensitive approach, because they do not want themselves to face any trouble by talking about a sect that they don't belong to, because it's a very sensitive and delicate sort of issue. And that's why I also suggest in my research that there is a need to have an incremental approach to making these, or to aiming for these social changes, much needed changes in the mindsets of peoples and then values that promote peace in the country. But there's no quick fix. You cannot fix things overnight that you have invested on negative, let's say, thinking for decades and decades, and here comes peace education, and you expect that to fix things overnight and change people's perceptions. And when there is hardly any investment at the national level on this by changing the curriculum. So mostly these initiatives are implemented by non-governmental organizations with the support of international institutions like the United Nations organizations, and also United States Institute of Peace and European Commission. They have been funding and supporting these community level initiatives in Pakistan. And then another key feature of these, or limitation of these organizations that are working on peace education, is that they lack capacity.
Yeah.
Mainly, not only because peace education is predominantly a Western dominated discipline, so to say, because peace studies was developed in the West and evolved. So there is a strong imprint of Western value system on peace studies and peace education. So it's very important to contextualize it. That's where many of the local organizations in Pakistan lack skills, because to be able to do that, you need, like strong evidence-based research like this one that tells you to contextualize it and make it more relevant to the people who are going to benefit from it. That has happened, that has started to happen recently, but that wasn't the case in the past 10 or 15 years of the rise of peace education in Pakistan, where still, it was mostly just, implementing programs that were successful in other countries without any changes into Pakistan. And that's where things did not produce the desired outcomes. And I'm often asked that, there's so much money that has come for peace in Pakistan. And I was asked this in my interview with SBS Punjabi. And I was asked that why the things haven't changed. The things haven't changed because these are just like few drops in the ocean. Yes. And they are not implemented across the country, in the country of 200 million people, where extremism is on the rise. So the extremist elements have, in my opinion, have far more resources, human resources, financial resources, comparing to resources that peace educators have or peace builders have. So there's still need for more attention to this field, especially by devoting more attention to first contextualizing it. And also another key finding of this research is research focuses on the role of teachers. You need to have highly trained teachers to teach these peace education programs in an effective manner. So you cannot just change contents and expect a teacher who has never had any training, teacher training, to do justice to what you are trying to achieve through these much needed programs.
That's critical, clearly. And when you're talking about madrasas, just give us an idea of what's the purpose of a madrasa. You hear a lot about the fact that the kids are taught to recite the Quran, etc., but not much else. What's the format of a madrasa?
There are all different kinds of madrasas. So there are madrasas also that teach secular subjects, because they also want their graduates to have jobs like the graduates of other institutions. They also, of course, because they are madrasas, so their focus is on Islamic teachings of Sharia and Quran and interpretations, and they learn Arabic because Quran is in Arabic. But then there are madrasas that also teach computer science subjects and other subjects. So there's a whole sort of diverse group of madrasas in the country.
Well, the two examples that you chose, what categories were they in?
One is, like predominantly just teaches Islamic studies,
Yes.
Jamia Naimia, but it has a it is highly regarded for its pro-peace stance. In fact, its previous leader was shot by Taliban for being pro-peace, and so his son now runs the institution. And recently, the Prime Minister of Pakistan actually visited that institution and talked about these different religious groups having so many similarities, Hindus and Muslims having similarities.
There's something similar between all of us in that time.
Indeed.
We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity. We're speaking with Zahid Ahmed, peace educator. We were talking about madrasa there before, Zahid, and I think earlier on you mentioned a female madrasa. There are female madrasas, obviously. Where do they fit in? How do they operate?
I think they operate in the same manner the way male madrasas operate. But from a perspective of a peace educator, I think that they are also equally significant, if not more, when you think of, let's say, the value of your peace education programs.
Yes.
And over the years, based on my experience of evaluating so many programs in Pakistan, I've seen a larger tendency of these programs just focusing on male madrasas. Especially since 9/11, there was so much focus on male madrasas. But female madrasas are very important, and that's why I included one in this project, because females as mothers, they have more influence, in my opinion, on children and younger generations. And these female madrasas, if they are actually enforcing those extremist ideologies in mothers to be, that's like very alarming. And there are examples of these graduates from female madrasas being involved in multiple terrorist activities in not only in Pakistan but also outside. So that makes us the significance of working with female madrasas is quite visible, and there's no second justification needed, in my opinion, and they should be equally focused as is the case with other institutions. And in this research, I also focused on programs being implemented in private schools where children from elite families mostly go, because it's expensive to send your children in those institutions. And it's important to work with those schools because you'll have these future's leaders coming out of those institutions, and it's important to teach them. Let's say there's one initiative which is called compassionate schools initiatives, and they teach skills on compassion to these students studying in private schools. And then there are initiatives that are implemented with public schools, and they are also very, very important because public schools have a larger canvas in Pakistan. They're state funded, they implement state endorsed curriculum, not like other two institutions. Although in madrasas also, if they are registered with the state body, then they also have some kind of uniformed curriculum. But madrasas, the teachers in madrasas are the least trained. So of course there's a huge amount of neglect because they don't come under the state and don't receive state funding. So there's this massive challenge in terms of not only the curriculum but also teachers lacking proper education. So for instance, there's a lot of rote learning in madrasas, and also to a great extent in public schools, that points to the need of critical thinking. So they lack critical thinking because that's not part of the curriculum and also the pedagogies that are needed to be able to do justice to peace education.
Yes, there's a lot of potholes there, aren't there, where you could, because going back to the private schools, because that's the power elite being prepared there, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. And that's more important, and in present times you have but also in the past it was equally important. But I think the focus should be equally on all three-tier system of education on all different components of now this highly segregated education system, in which you have different classes going into different kinds of education system depending on what they can afford or what the children's parents can afford on their affordability. But there's no other way than also thinking of having a uniformed system of education in Pakistan, because that would make the life of a peace educator very easy,
Yes,
comparing
that's
to
right.
what it is now, because
Yeah.
you have to produce different kinds of contents and different strategies for implementing peace education and achieving the desired outcomes. So having a uniformed education system would help to begin with, but having this peace education integrated into the existing curricula would also help a great deal in dealing with multiple challenges that Pakistan is faced with, sectarianism, ethnic violence, political violence, and so on. And also these have implications beyond Pakistan's borders.
Yes.
In this, highly globalized world in which people, travel a lot. People go for jobs abroad, they go for higher education abroad. So there's, larger, and Pakistan is, I think one of the biggest contributors of skilled labor
Yeah.
going around the world,
Yes.
and so there can be implications beyond Pakistan's borders, and there should be greater focus on that as well.
So covering that very broad palette that you have looked at, coming back, what would be the key issues across the three of them? Context is one. What would be some of the others?
Among the other issues, I talked about the quality of teachers varying a lot between these three institutions, and one private school on which I included a case study in this, that was, in my opinion, or that has been so successful in implementing peace education because their teachers are highly trained.
Yes.
A very experienced teacher who are able to actually not only implement peace education but address the questions coming from students in a very reasonable manner, because students will have variety of questions and concerns on peace education, because this peace building in itself or the peace education contents are going to perhaps for the very first time ask those students to think, like in a very unusual way what they usually do, think about their identities and identities of other people belonging to other faiths and religions and cultures, and they can naturally have a lot of questions, and the teacher should be prepared to address those questions in a reasonable manner.
Yes, and there's a question I'd like to address in a reasonable manner is, why does time run out? And it has run out. Look, really, Zahid, fascinating to look at this peace education, and good luck with that, because it's clearly something well worthwhile, and may you have every success.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You've been watching Harmony in Diversity. We will be back next week. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.
Baha'u'llah, Shanti Om.